it gives me great pleasure to invite two distinguished speakers on the interesting topic, Myanmar and its strategic importance to India. Myanmar is strategically located close to our eastern borders. She shares borders with four of our northeastern states, that is Arunachal Pradesh, Nagaland, Manipur, and Mizoram. Thus, India has a major stake to ensure peace in Myanmar, as there is ethnic affiliation of the population on both sides of the border. In addition, Myanmar is an important link in India's Look East foreign policy. Subsequent to the takeover by the military junta, Myanmar is witnessing major unrest and violence. On 11 April, the Air Force of the military junta carried out an airstrike, resulting in the death of approximately 170 people. Being an important country in the Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries have been conducting regular meetings to end the crisis in Myanmar. India's concern involves influx of refugees into the northeastern states of India, particularly Mizoram and Manipur, and flow of narcotics. Further, some insurgent groups have also found safe haven in North Myanmar. Coming to Coco Island, which is the Bay of Bengal, it has been leased to China by Myanmar. As such, is under the control of China. It poses a security concern for us, and is now being developed into a military base. Lately, they have constructed an airstrip there and made a big dome, apparently, for a radar. China's growing influence in Myanmar has also far-reaching security implications for India. Presently, India is following a dual-track policy. India is emphasizing on restoration of democracy in Myanmar, though friendly engagements with the military junta. For this session, we have two distinguished panelists, Mr. Pratap Hablikar and Ms. Rami Desai. They shall discuss and analyze the importance of India's strategic relations with Myanmar. Stay tuned and wait for the interesting discussion to take place. Mr. Pratap Hablikar is Managing Trustee of the Institute of Contemporary Studies, Bangalore. It is a not-profit think tank specializing in security and strategic affairs. He is a life member of the United Services Institution, New Delhi, and director of the board of Asian Dialogue Society, Singapore. Previously, he retired as a Special Secretary, Government of India, after putting in 38 years of meritorious service, for which he was decorated by the Government of India. Mr. Hablikar was a visiting professor, Department of Geopolitics and Internal Relations, Manipur University, adjunct faculty, International Security and Strategic Studies Program, National Institute of Advanced Studies at Bangalore. He was also associated with the Christ University, Bangalore, and St. Joseph's College, Bangalore, in developing a new approach to study of contemporary developments. During his government service, he specialized in insurgency and counterinsurgency developments in Northeast region. Mr. Hablikar is also a certified information security practitioner from the International Institute of Safety and Security Management, New Delhi. He is one of the founding members of MaxiBridge Security, a high-end next-generation security consultancy company established in Bangalore to help bring new synergies in the world of private security and protection and expand India's strategic footprints overseas. He has been writing for security and defense-related journals and for leading newspapers and magazines regularly, besides participating in seminars and workshops both in India and overseas. Among his many speaking commitments, he has delivered lectures at the National Defense University, at military establishments and the Staff College, Prospect Foundation, Taiwan, National University of Singapore, and Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. The second panelist is again a very accomplished lady, Rami Desai, has on theology and anthropology of Religion from the King's College, London, and subject expertise in Northeast region of India. She has spent 15 years studying Northeast history, insurgency, ethnic militancy, religion, and identity. She has traveled extensively in the Northeast region, interviewed a large number of tribes and various insurgent outfits in order to understand the complex nature of the conflict in the region. In 2009, as part of India Foundation, conducted research on insurgency-led demographic change. In 2011, as a founding director of the Northeast Policy Institute at Guwahati in Assam, she worked extensively in area publishing articles on insurgency and conflict, religion, and social movements. She is presently director of Pathfinder India, that undertakes research and analysis. Also a distinguished fellow of the Delhi-based think tank India Foundation, focused on current affairs, Northeast and Indo-Pacific regions. She holds a popular show for India Foundation called Insight, which covers current affairs, security, and defense issues. Media outreach is available on India leading channels. Additionally, she is a consulting editor of Global Order, a foreign policy publication and research organization. We couldn't have got better panelists for this subject. Now, coming down to the brass tacks, we will start with Rami. Rami, since you have done a lot of research in the Northeast, what is the inter-se relationship between the tribes of Northeast and Myanmar?
Well, first of all, let me thank you. That introduction, I can barely believe is mine. But it also is such a privilege. It's such a privilege and an honor to be with you and Pratap and with the entire NESMA team to be invited on this platform to discuss a topic that I think is really important, not just because I look at the Northeast or, both of you are experts in the Northeast, but also because I don't hear a lot of conversation about Myanmar. It's almost like, people have ignored it. But the strategic value for Myanmar, the importance of Myanmar for India is absolutely huge, and it's huge for us on multiple levels. It's not just, of course, all of us here have looked at this region from a security spectrum, but not just a security spectrum, even if we look at it from the point of view of our soft power, whether it's historical ties, cultural ties. There's a lot to be said about our relationship with Myanmar. So, of course, coming back to your question geopolitically, it is important for India because it stands at the center of the India-Southeast Asia geography. It's also really the only country that shares over 1,600 kilometers of land border with northeastern India and over a 720 kilometer sea border. Now, with Northeast India, that becomes really even more important because Northeast for a really long time in India was in a very precarious position. It anyway is geographically, but it was also in a very precarious position psychologically because the Northeast always felt distant from the rest of the country because of many, many reasons, which obviously we will not go into on this episode. But because of this sort of distance, it was written with so much of conflict and porous borders and ethnic clashes that Myanmar's sort of stability or instability directly also impacted the Northeast region. Imagine over 1,600 kilometers of land border, anything that happens there will impact the Northeast. Now, in addition to, logistically located, its logistics and that sort of strategic importance of it, Myanmar is also really, really important because it's at the intersection of India's neighborhood first policy as well as India's Act East policy. And India has now kept that in mind and also envisioned, let's say, the Sagar vision, under which they've developed the Sitwe port, or other such bilateral, trilateral, multilateral sort of engagements, because it is our gateway to Southeast Asia. It becomes very important for any of our policies to really take off from the ground. So, if you were to ask me, what were what were the key top main factors that makes Myanmar hugely strategic for us, apart from its geography, you know, I'd say the Act East policy, I'd say the neighborhood first policy, I'd say the impact on insurgency, I'd say the impact on drug trafficking, and of course,
Correct.
last but not the least, but really importantly, it's China's footprint in Myanmar, which would have a direct impact on us. Of course, we can go on about the strategic relationship and the nuances of it, whether it's the Kaladan multimodal project or anything else. But I think we can come back to that question and go deeper into it.
Thanks. Pratap, she gave a good talk. I just want to ask you the importance of Myanmar's strategic location for India and the Southeast Asia. What do you?
General Mehta, first let me thank you.
Deepak, please call me Deepak.
Deepak, let me thank you for the opportunity to be on your in your show today. I think it's very important that you have focused the attention on Myanmar, one of India's most important neighbors. Not basically even from a strategic point of view, even from India's perspective in the Northeast and beyond Northeast to Southeast Asia and beyond. Not many think tanks or platforms are focused on this particular issues. As far as I'm concerned, India's interests in Myanmar are geopolitical, geostrategic in nature. And unlike the others, India has had a very strong cultural, political, and military affiliation with Myanmar, even Burma. You will recall that when the opposition was at the gates of Rangoon, India supported the Burmese army with artillery and other supplies. So that was very, very crucial for the existence of the regime then. I think India has an abiding interest in Myanmar's safety and security and stability. And that's how things are. But I feel that India's concerns in the Northeast are not only looking at India's safety and security of our 7 states in the Northeast, but also the safety and stability of Myanmar. That is very, very important. An unstable and insecure Myanmar will cause us extraordinary problems. I think that's why in your opening statement you mentioned that India has a twin policies towards that country. You have to recognize that the military is in power, and keeping the military's agenda that it wants to keep the country together so that Myanmar does not disintegrate. And secondly, India always has looked at the population of Myanmar as its own constituency. If you look at the number of investments we have made in the social sector, have been tremendous. I think that explains why India is so focused on looking at its relationship with Myanmar. And that's where we are headed. I think in 1967, we missed the bus in joining the ASEAN for reasons that were prevalent then. But I think Prime Minister Narasimha Rao realized that we had to become part and parcel of this region to our east, so that we partake of the Asian tigers, as they were called, in economic development and progress. That's why Mr. Narasimha Rao decided to look east rather than look west, because he knew the west was not going to be suitable for India's national policies. So that's how it's in 1971 1991 he started. And I think till about 2014, it had a very slow progress with the Act East policy coming into place. You had the strategic component into the Northeast and Look East policy. That's how I think we have developed this relationship to a point where I think India can see green shoots out of this new policy. I think, as far as I'm concerned, Myanmar will continue to be a very, very important player in our strategic policy in the East.
You mentioned that we have brought in a lot of investment in Myanmar in terms of development. I just seen the other day, I think the port at Switi has been inaugurated on the 9th of this month. And this Kaladan River also is being dredged to make it navigable by barges, I guess. And some more roads have also been developed into the Chin areas. Yes, I think we have done a lot of investment in there. But what are the fault lines in Myanmar? What are the differences between the democratic government and the military junta? Why is this going on? What's going on there?
I think the fact remains that the ethnic, let's say Myanmar is like a horseshoe. On three sides you have Bangladesh, India, China, Laos, and Thailand. And you have the open side, you have the Bay of Bengal. That's the first one. The second one is you have the Rakhine state. I'm sure Rami will talk about the Rohingyas. The Rakhine state or the Arakan state is again a picture of majority of Muslims and Buddhists. If you look at the states on the borders, they are ethnic states, people who come from the Christian background. But the heartland is Burmese. So that's the second point, because right from the time that this country came into existence in 48 after it obtained independence from the Brits, there has not been any major development on the Panglong Conference, which General Aung San then offered to everybody that you join this political arrangement, and if you don't want, you can leave. But Aung San was assassinated before actually anything got transacted on the ground. So since 1948 to 1950, Myanmar has been unable to draw down on the contradictions that exist between the majoritarian Buddhist community and the ethnic minorities. And on the ethnic minorities, you have two varieties. One is the people who are coming from the Christian areas of Myanmar, and you have Muslims in Rohingya, in Arakan state, or those who are based in other parts of the country. I think that has been
was the next question I also was asked about Rohingyas.
Yes.
What is
the third point here is that the extent of differences between the majority religion and the others, the minority ethnics and the religious minorities, has never been healed. I think even in the constitution which was there prior to, it was not addressed. Even in the 2008 constitution, this has not been addressed. So I think the fault lines are that the inability of the majority religion to settle down with the minorities. The second, the most important impediment is the military. The military has taken upon itself a role that it will be the protector of the country's stability, security, safety, and integrity. And having taken over the power in '62, when UNO offered it to Navy, the military has not looked back, except for those brief 2 years in 1988 to 90, and during the time when President Thein Sein was in office. That was the brief window of flirtation with quasi-democracy. The military is afraid that going back to barracks will create a problem, a civilian unrest, which the country will not be able to handle. On the selfish side, the military feels that there will be accountability. A democratic parliament, a government will have accountability. If anybody can give the military a reasonable assurance, you please go back to the barracks, give the future to us, we'll ensure that nothing will happen to you. That's very sad. These are the fault lines.
Right. Rami, since you have studied Northeast very extensively, there's Rohingya crisis which has come into being both for Bangladesh as well as for India. What do you have to say for this, please?
Sir, the Rohingya crisis held everybody's imagination for a really long time, and it still does, because it impacts not just Myanmar, but Bangladesh, India. Now, in my opinion, we have to look at the whole issue in its entirety, and its entirety begins from its recent past. In 2017, there's a very, we don't talk a lot about it, but there was the Khamong Sek massacre, and Hindu villages in a cluster known as Khamong Sek were attacked. Now, apparently they say, or this is what the information is, that 99 Hindu villages were massacred by the Arakan Rohingya Salvation Army. A month later, the Myanmar army discovered mass graves as well. So, this is a very complex issue because it has a lot of sentiments involved, Following the massacre, a huge amount of Hindu families, along with the Rakhines, fled, these areas and took shelter, I believe, in Sitwe. They say that more than 500 of these people took shelter. Now, the genesis of this issue is fairly evident, but India therefore has a very clear stance on this. It's even in the parliament been made very clear by the Home Minister that we will not be taking any Rohingyas in, even though we have a great relationship with Bangladesh. This is one point of divergence, and we've stuck to our guns. A lot of people were surprised, why are we taking such a strong stance? But this has a lot of impact on us. Now, if you look at illegal immigration of Rohingyas into India and their stay, that can have national security ramifications, because as it is, these borders are porous. As it is, we have a problem of illegal migration. Then there's also been this sort of background of communal clashes, albeit not in India and Myanmar, but there still has been, So how do we know who's coming in? Of course, let me also say this, that right after, I think the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, I was studying for a talk on Bangladesh, and, has there been any repercussion there? One of the things that we found that via Tripura and all, on trains, we found a lot of Rohingyas that had managed to, come in, not to stay in the Northeast, but to go to UP. So all these situations cause a little bit of concern. Number two, it also, this sort of immigration also impacts local populations in the areas, and these populations again have already seen large-scale influxes of immigrants. It causes political instability. Number three,
That's right.
when leaders start mobilizing based on perceptions, trafficking, this sort of migration becomes a way to traffic, human smuggling. Also, the rule of law and integrity of India are undermined by this sort of illegal immigration. So I think, Rohingyas, much like any other illegal immigration into the Northeast, has serious security consequences. But having said that, because of their background, and because of the violence that had already taken place, and because of this sort of interrelationship, it makes it even more important to look at it from a security perspective.
You're right. It has a very grave security implication. There are reports that these people have managed to get identifications in India in various forms. So it is, and they can be hijacked by some inimical groups to act.
Correct.
It's a very major security hassle. Uh, Pratap, how have the Western sanctions on Myanmar impacted India-Myanmar relations? Has there any action on this?
In 1997, India became one of the very few countries in the world to announce a $10 million line of credit for Myanmar. As you remember, in April 1997, President Clinton, when he was in Thailand, announced a series of sanctions against Myanmar. But India clearly broke ranks with the countries which had imposed sanctions, because we believed that sanctions were not in any way going to change or alter the situation. It would hurt the common man, but to the entrenched regimes, it would make no difference because they would find other methods of staying in power. So as far as I'm concerned, I think it was a very remarkable decision by the government to give Myanmar a $10 million line of credit for using Indian goods and services for whatever purpose they wanted. I think it was a very remarkable thing. And I think from that time onwards, we have constantly indicated that we would like to ensure that India's interests remain at the foremost and that we are unlikely to be swayed by the sanctions which are imposed by Western countries on Myanmar. I mean, that's how we look at it, and we will continue to move forward because India's national security interests and objectives lies in the fact that we continue to be engaged with the neighboring countries of ours. In fact, we have seen that right from 1988 to 2010, India-Myanmar relations were not on an even keel. Between 1988 to 1990, as you know, General Deepak, that the then government had a very vast strategic plan. We were involved in Operation Brass Tacks, you were Operation Checkerboard, and then you had Nepal, you had Bangladesh, and you had the IPKF. So I think the foreign policy instruments of India were really being tested. There was a time that India decided that it would bring change to Myanmar to give support to the people to establish democracy. I think that's how 1988, 1990 was a time when we were trying to ensure that democratic ideals were being, important for us, would also be observed by people across the border. In fact, you remember Operation Golden Bird, which was being pursued by the government of India against insurgents alongside the Indo-Myanmar border. We had an extraordinary cooperation from the Burmese until such time that India awarded the Jawaharlal Nehru Peace Prize to Aung San Suu Kyi. That's how the relationship became, it did not improve further. It went down. It took a long time for us, at least in 2010, to revert to a time when we could speak with our Burmese counterparts in a more even-handed manner. I think sanctions have not impacted us on Myanmar. In fact, they have provided us with avenues or opportunities in trying to take Indian goods and services into the country in a manner which we had not done before. I think, as I've always argued, Henry Kissinger took the Americans to China in 1972 because he wanted to use China as the countervailing aspect than Soviet Union, but they ignored Myanmar, Burma in the process. If you look at the Chinese credentials and the Burmese credentials, I think the Burmese come out much better. They've had 5 elections so far. They're none in China. So anyway, this debate we can leave for another day. But yes, sanctions on Myanmar have proved to be productive for India. We have been able to get into the country in a very positive manner.
Thanks. Now, I mean, besides the strategic aspects, I think is economic also, in a sense that this Mekong Ganga cooperation, where the road is going to come from India right up to Vietnam, it has economic implications also for India, because India is a very big manufacturing setup. What do you feel of it, Rami?
So, may I just add, with your permission, to your last question that you put towards my co-panelist on Western sanctions on Myanmar? Because I think I have a slightly different take. I appreciate, your take. I think, that's a really interesting point of view. But may I continue, sir, with your permission?
Please.
So, one of the things that really, really gets to me is virtue signaling by the West in the name of democracy. This is why I want to jump into this conversation, because I don't buy it. I find that the mess that they left in Afghanistan, which really nearly has jeopardized our entire Northwest frontier security, is absolutely horrendous. But, sir, in my opinion, in countries and situations like Myanmar, which has China waiting to support it, all right, where the largest Myanmar's foreign debt of 40% is owed to China.
Okay.
Sanctions is not really a good idea. You put the entire region in jeopardy. They have minimal effect on ground, apart, of course, from sending a morale-raising message in support of pro-democracy protests. What else does it do? In Myanmar, the impact on military actions is absolutely nil. They continue with their policies. They remain in power. Even when there was a democratically elected government, the fact of the matter is that there are 25% votes that are reserved. You need 75% to pass anything. The military, therefore, was successfully preventing any constitutional amendment aimed to reduce their own powers. Now, economically, the two conglomerates of military have controlled really, like, the largest development projects in Myanmar, and all major foreign investments. So how is any sanction really going to have any impact? The sanctions of 1990 to 2010 focused on suspension of development aid, and any sort of technical assistance. Who do you think stepped in? China stepped in, and China continues to step in. In 2003, they had a complete import ban. These trade and investment sanctions only reduced Western investment in Myanmar, and it increased the unemployment rate. So thousands of workers lost their jobs. There was a huge thriving garment industry. Many people lost their jobs. It had a really, negative local impact. What sort of sentiments do you create on ground? That also goes against you. So I think we have to remember that for any constitutional amendment bill to become an act, they need more than 75% of votes, and military reserves have 25%
Absolutely.
of votes, So I think that has to be kept in mind. And, the Myanmar military doesn't seem to be under pressure from anybody. So US can have a Burma 2020 sanction act against them, but they've made it very clear to the United Nations also that, if you remember, the leadership did not receive Christine Bergner, the UN Special Envoy to Myanmar, when she visited Thailand, and the Deputy Chief of Staff of Myanmar said that we will have to learn to walk with few friends. The military is clear on its stance. They've made it clear, they've said it, So now neighboring countries like Thailand, China, India, of course, will help Myanmar develop economically through aid, development projects, investments. But Myanmar will also reach out to, other countries like Russia and Japan, which it already has. So, of course, this is a very complex situation, but, putting sanctions is allowing somebody else to come in, a bigger, neighbor like China to walk in. So I think we have to be very careful of how we look at sanctions.
That is exactly how we'll be able to get. What are the major Chinese development? Of course, Rami has brought out very clearly that the void created by the sanctions has been filled in by China. Well, what are the major aspects related to development by China in Myanmar?
It is commonly said that if China offers to participate in infrastructure development program of yours, China is there to stay. So that's how I would like to look at it. So when Deng Xiaoping was the supremo in China, as one of his developmental prospects, he decided that some of the weakest provinces of China would get prominence in his economic development program. And Yunnan province was selected to be one of them, because at that point of time, China was looking to push into the warm waters of the Indian Ocean, either through Myanmar, as it is doing through Pakistan, and get access to ports which would help China gain strategic advantage. And I think Hambantota was a last of the thing that came on the thing, but this is all part of Deng Xiaoping's look south policy. It's the Yunnan province would be linked to northern Myanmar, and through the river Irrawaddy, they would use it as a transit point to come down to Chokpyu. And China was willing to invest billions of dollars in this because they did not want to be trapped, as we call it, as the problems which China faces in the Malacca Straits, or the Malacca Dilemma, as one calls it. Keeping that in mind, China continued to pour in money for development of transport and logistics, communication, and things like this. So China was there to stay. And as peers observed it, and they also took the next step of creating a pipeline that would pump oil and gas from the Bay of Bengal, the two huge platforms that's set up, and it would take it back to Yunnan province. I think that was the major development at the time, and the Chinese were willing to pay. And that had to come through certain territories which were being held by the ethnic armed groups, as Rami mentioned earlier. So I think, yes, the Chinese have a major role, but for them, Myanmar is not only as a transit point to the Bay of Bengal and to the Indian Ocean and the Indo-Pacific area, it also gives Myanmar, China access to the rare earth minerals of Myanmar, not only up in the north, but in the Rakhine state, which borders India and Bangladesh. There have been studies that have been conducted to show that strategic and rare earth minerals are available along the Irrawaddy basin in Rakhine state, also in contiguous areas of Bangladesh. So I think that the Chinese have a very, very definitive plan as to how they would like to proceed. And also, they not only kept the military on their side, but they also opened dialogue with the NLD under Aung San Suu Kyi. They also have been, helping the Southern Shan State Army by giving them the most modern weapons.
Okay.
They say it has more advanced weapons than the Burmese army itself. So all this means to say that China's $18 to $30 billion investment in Myanmar is going to stay, and the Chinese will do everything in their plans to ensure that their investments in Myanmar are protected. Their aims and objectives strategically are well served by keeping themselves occupied in Myanmar. So I think they're not worried about anything else. They want to ensure that because once you get into Chokpyu and Bay of Bengal, you have an easy access. And now with the port coming up in Cambodia, the Chinese seem to be having an advantage. But I think as far as I'm concerned, I think it's a matter of great strategic importance for the Chinese. But the Chinese have also been deterred by the success of India's Act East policy. For
Thanks,
example,
Chairman. The Chinese have constructed SEPEC in Pakistan. Have they constructed a similar sort of a land corridor from Myanmar to the Yunnan province of China?
they're in the process of doing it.
In the process, all right.
They're in the process of doing it because it has to come to the confluence of two important rivers, Malika and the Malia River in northern Myanmar, which connects the Irrawaddy River. But there are a lot of things that we need to look at on the Irrawaddy River itself, because by using this particular route, they will save billions of dollars by way of transshipment from Shanghai to Southeast Asia through the troubled areas of South China Sea, have to run the gauntlet on the Malacca Straits, and move southwards. So I think either the Arctic route or this route is going to be something that they want to be very, very sure about themselves.
Would it be prudent to say that the impact of the Chinese influence has India's strategic affects India's strategic interests?
Let's look at it this way. One of the largest and the biggest project that we have undertaken, the part one of this project called the Kaladan Multimodal Transportation Project, kicked off in Chitwe, or the whole Akyab, on the 9th of this month, when we had our minister, Mr. Sonowal, who represented India at the ceremony that India began operations in that part of the world. And this itself is a major achievement for us. And like I said, if you have a lot of interaction with the Bangladeshis, Japan has indicated an interest to develop a deep sea water port in a place called Matarbari, which is in the Teknaf, Cox's Bazar area, into a huge project. It will help India. So I think as far as we are concerned, given the strategic plans, I think India's move to Akyab to getting linked with the Japanese projects for this part of the world is going to pay dividends, because now by doing this, Japan gets Bangladesh on board, because Japan has a very good relationship with Bangladesh as well as Myanmar. So I don't want to extend a tenuous logic, but what I'm saying is India, Japan, Bangladesh will be a good reason for us to look at countering Chinese influence in this part of the world. And as I speak, there is a report that has been submitted to the Sri Lankan government, where India, Japan, and Sri Lanka will be a part of a program for the Indo-Pacific. So that is going to be huge. And I'm telling you, if you look back to the map of Myanmar, there is another port called Dawei, or the old TAVO, Tawai, in the old Tenasserim division. And I think as a soldier, you remember General Slim's book, Field Marshal Slim's book, Defeat into Victory, when the Allies landed in Tenasserim. That has been developed into a huge special economic zone earlier in about 10-15 years ago, with Thai-Australian aid. I think if India, as part of the Quad, were able to look at Dawai port, then you have Matarbari on one side, Sitwe and Dawai, giving us the kind of advantage that we could not have thought about 10 years ago.
Fantastic.
The second one, as India is now setting up a large number of petrol stations across Myanmar, as I read in the media. The third one is the Myanmar Airways International, a private sector airlines, now begin to fly from Rangoon to Chennai on a weekly flight. I think some of these have not been highlighted in the Indian media, but I think there is slow but very, very definitive plans in place so that we could tackle. We can't, $20-30 billion of Chinese assistance is not going to be easy for us to tackle, but I think we are making some very good progress. For example, I should say that last month the Indian Council of World Affairs had the second of the Track 2 dialogue with on Myanmar, which included all of the stakeholders, and there were some very interesting takeaways from it. The third will be held in Laos sometime in June. For the first one was in Thailand. So I think India has taken the lead. Today, people in Southeast Asia, the ASEAN, see India not only as G20, the president of G20, but India's stock has gone up in the Southeast Asian region many more times than what I would have imagined would have happened 5-6 years ago. I think there is a lot of commonality of ideas and strategic thinking that's taking place.
That's a good sign. But the thorn, as far as we are concerned, is that Coco Island, which has been leased to China in the Bay of Bengal, just north of Andaman. I think turning out to be a major military base for the Chinese.
Like if I can bring some perspective into it, Coco Islands were was part of British India, where it served as a penitentiary. It was a prison in 1948 up to 1962. Remained so. And it became a place for the Burmese Navy to have an outpost, a military outpost. In the mid-90s, we had a lot of activities of Chinese technicians going to the island. And Chinese technicians putting up radar and surveillance equipment there. There was an old Second World War airstrip at that point of time, which had been used. But I think Coco Islands, with the kind of government you have in Myanmar, I don't think they would allow the Chinese to carry out any activity which is detrimental to India's interests.
Right.
First one. The second one, the Burmese are very nationalistic minded. They would not like to give the Chinese any more leeway than what has been done. And I don't think if giving away a part of their land to the Chinese is against Burmese sense of sovereignty.
Yeah.
It is not replication of what happened in other countries. I think 3 or 4 things that, if you're talking about the Chatham House article, I think we need to look at the provocation behind the article. They are trying to paint as if India is taking it lying down, and I think the government of India know very well that Coco Island is not something that's going to be of any great threat to us. The Chinese having a radar station there, it doesn't make much difference. But I think the Burmese understand us, and they would not like to create more problems to us by allowing this controversy to continue. I think we have to address these problems, and the Chinese may not like to, the Burmese may not like to say anything more about it.
Yeah. Rami, how can Myanmar help India to find insurgency or deal with the inimical groups which are holed up there? Like, for example, Paresh Barwa is a 20-odd chaps in Myanmar. How can they help us in this field?
First of all, let me add that I completely agree with Sir about China. I think we have to look at it in perspective because, like he mentioned, a very crucial thing about Burmese nationalism. I think that is still very strong, and we shouldn't get unnecessarily worried. Of course, always remain alert. Coco Islands is only 55 kilometers away or so from Andaman and Nicobar, but I'm sure our our agencies are very well aware of what's happening and, know exactly what to do. But I'd just like to point out before I answer your question on the Northeast that even though China and Myanmar in 2023 will be celebrating the 73rd anniversary of the diplomatic relations, we must never forget that, because of China's support or, interference in Myanmar, there were many Chinese factories that were burnt in Yangon. And there is a lot of discontent between the locals about China's influence in Myanmar. So, yes, I think we should look at that in perspective. But your question to how can Myanmar help the Northeast. You see, with insurgency, that's always been a problem for India. You know, a lot of our northeastern insurgents have operated from Myanmar. You know, as far back as NSCN, the Mizos. So they didn't get a lot of help from China, but these were the routes that they used to use to go to China, to train there, to bring arms back. Um, they had continuous sort of tribes and ethnic brotherhood that they depended on to use these routes. NSC and K operated from there for a really, really long time, you know, and that was their safe haven. And it wasn't because, you know, the military wanted it to be like this, or the government wanted it to be like this. It was so because it was a problem for them also. Even they couldn't, you know, manage to control these groups because of the kind of terrain they were in, the kind of, you know, mutual ethnic support that they had, so on and so forth. It was because of the Myanmarese, you know, sort of interest in India and their friendly relations that both the countries have kept with each other, that they gave a helping hand to India to sort these problems out, because these insurgent groups were stationed in Myanmar. So, you know, Myanmar plays a very, very important role in doing this. It plays a very important role in, you know, ensuring that arms, ammunition, drugs are not carried through their terrain. Of course, you know, there can't ever be 100% sort of impact and you know, a level of correction, but still, you know, to have a friendly country on the other side always helps. So I think Myanmar plays a very important role in helping India contain
Yep.
its insurgent and separatist movements. Even right now, actually, if you look at it, we saw some skirmishes happening around the Mizo border as well, you know, post the unfortunate incident in Manipur, where the officer and his family were shot dead. Myanmar gave a befitting response. So, you know, this sort of mutual sort of aid, you know, is what we need in especially areas like the Northeast where the border is so porous.
Thank you. Would you like anything else you would like to talk about this India Myanmar aspect?
Of course, you know, it's so important to us because of ACT's policy. So peace in Myanmar can only benefit India. You know, this is our gateway to Southeast Asia. You know, so some sort of mutual cooperation is what we should be. Our agenda should be.
Yeah. Pratap, anything from your side?
Actually, Deepak, two or three takeaways from today's discussions. One is, I think we need more discussions like this. One, we need more discussions on India's Northeast region. Why are we calling it India's Northeast region? Why don't we deal with all those states on an individual basis?
Right, right.
Yeah, Northeast region itself is a requirement which was there in the 50s from a, you know, from a security and a strategic point of view. And I think that we need to give each of the northeastern states an equal platform to articulate their concerns. For example, Rami has written, I think, 3 or 4 articles in the last several days on what's happening in Manipur. You see, for people who are in south of India, what's happening in the northeast, in the north and in the west, there is no emotional baggage. So there are a lot of people from the northeast who are working in the south. So I think there is an emotional connect that we need to
Right.
develop. Universities, colleges, and things like this, they are the vehicles. The second point is that we need to bring in more youngsters. Yeah, I'm in the Jurassic Park, as I see it, because we need to bring in more people from the Northeast into this debate and dialogue, so that there is a lot of 360 degrees exposure to this. But not the least, I would request you and Pavanji that you have a sequel to today's program. I
We'll
think
do that.
it's important that you have
But actually,
struck
I
something
did
in
not
favor of,
I did not want to
favor
touch
of
upon
India's
this.
strategic interests. And I think it's very important that we keep Myanmar in the midst of our, strategic policies. I think I'll end there. I think thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Rami, for being there. I think the two of us have probably been able to put 4 wheels on this subject so that we drive it ahead.
I must add to it that I possibly have learned more than I had to offer. So thank you for that. But on the point of Northeast, I think it's absolutely crucial that we create more intelligentsia, we create more interest. But also alongside that, I think, people must have the responsibility to restrain from commenting if they don't understand these states well. Because like in the case of Manipur, I took almost 2 weeks to start writing because I said, let things calm down. These are very sensitive areas with sensitive emotions. One thing can set something off,
Yes.
and you have to spend a lot of time. And as both of you would understand, because it's like you said, sir, it's not one state. There are many states, many different tribes, many different political dimensions, security dimensions. You have to spend a lot of time. You can't go in once and write an article, come out and say, this is what I saw.
I didn't want to bring up the greater Nagaland aspect because it affects both India and Myanmar both.
Absolutely, sir. But that will take another entire episode. I think it's such an interesting topic, though, because we still haven't sealed the deal, so as to say, and that's only with IM. So I think there's so much to talk about there. So we hope to, continue this as Pratapji said.
I must thank the two of you. I think it's a very interesting. I've learned a lot with interacting with the two of you in terms of the strategic aspects, in terms of economic aspects, in terms of the fault lines in Myanmar, the Rohingya problem. I think, thank you very much indeed. It's a very illuminating discussion that we've had. And hopefully, in future, we'll get onto the Northeast state also. Thank you once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anjay,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye.